I call it the pink sparkly vagina technique.
Nice.
And it's something that I would teach women to do, where she would turn her vagina into a pink sparkly vortex of energy. And I was first teaching women how to do this to enhance pleasure. And then I was doing some sort of women's group, and I was teaching them somehow the pink sparkly vagina. It tends to come up a lot. 3 months later, I get this email from this woman I didn't know, one of the attendees, that she had been struggling with infertility for 2 years. And they had gone through all the different means, and she was just about, to give up. And she ended up trying the pink sparkly vagina, and she got pregnant naturally.
Welcome to the Acid for Squares podcast. I am your host, Tanya Dahl.
And I'm Cody Blue. Hit that like, subscribe button, comment, hit that notification button. It helps us out. And today's episode is called Sex versus Sex Magic, because we have the honor and the pleasure to be sitting here with Dr. Laura Berman. She has just released her 10th book, Sex Magic.
And so many copies over here.
Yeah, which is, she's
Can't have too many copies.
Can't have too many. She's a New York Times bestselling author. She was the sex therapist for the Oprah Winfrey Show, for Dr. Oz's show. She's an award-winning host, and she has a podcast called The Language of Love. And yeah, she's just an all-around badass. And yeah, Laura, thank you for being with us. We appreciate you.
I'm so excited to talk to you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate it. So let's start off. Sex versus sex magic. What's the difference?
Both are good, right? Sex is always good. The way I describe it, I think in the introduction, is that you could have just sex, and there's nothing wrong with just sex. In fact, when we were talking outside before you came in, I think you guys just had just sex this morning.
We did have just sex. We did. We were half asleep. It was morning sex.
Which is great. And you can but sex magic is taking it to an entirely new level. To me, this grew out of, this is my 10th book. I didn't think I had anything else to say about sex. Talk about the fantasies, the tips, the tools, the toys, the role plays, the blocks, the physical, medical reasons, hormones, everything you can think of, I have written about. But what started to happen is that no matter where I went, I just started seeing this trend where people are looking for spicing it up, quote unquote. That's what I always get asked about, in all the wrong places, externally, outside themselves. And I started asking the same question I always ask, because everything we want because we want to feel a certain way, whether it's a new car, new job, a certain kind of sex. So I would say, all right, well, so you want to spice it up. What are you actually wanting to feel? That's what we're really looking for. And what I kept getting is intense excitement. It was one or the other. So then I started taking a deeper dive into some of the things that I'd been studying for a long time, these ancient techniques with Tantra, Kundalini, Taoism, the energetics of sex. And what I discovered is that you can create tremendous, mind-blowing physical, emotional, and spiritual intensity through sex with sex magic, or you can have just sex.
Yeah, right. And, we practice what you would call sex magic. And for us, I think the difference is sex is the pleasure without the almost like the conscious awareness of the spiritual transaction that's taking place.
Mm-hmm. There's like a practice with what we've done with sex magic where it's, syncing our bodies and our breath up and all this stuff. So can you explain a little bit deeper?
How it works?
Yeah, that's part of it. So there's so many different elements to sex magic. There's a whole book worth of stuff. But so there's a lot. But so there's different elements to it. On the one hand, there is the physical, right? So for most of us, sexual sensation or arousal is localized to the genitals. That's where most of us feel it when we're aroused. With sex magic, you learn to pull that through your entire body if you want to move it up, to blow it out the top of your head, to circle it between the two of you. That's just on the physical sense. On the energetic sense, you are attuning to the subtle energies in your bodies and blending those together and exchanging them in a really really beautiful and powerful way. And by the way, you can have sex magic by yourself. I wrote this book for singles as well as people in relationships. And then on a spiritual level, it creates a level of intensity and connection. It makes sex spiritual, and not in a religious sense, obviously, but in a really metaphysical, powerful sense. And then there is the sex magic that is about manifestation, because sexual arousal and orgasm is the highest frequency our body can hold. And that is the key. My last book, Quantum Love, was how to harness your body's energy to manifest the love life you want. So if you want your partner to show up in a different way, or you're trying to call love in, and it's really about the science underneath the law of attraction, right? When we talk about the law of attraction or manifestation, we can say, I want $1 million and I'm going to write myself a check for $1 million. But if our body is our transceiver, and if we aren't holding the energetic frequency of he, she, they who has $1 million, that's the key to really manifesting. So with sex magic, when you match intention, conscious intention, whatever it is you want to manifest, and you hold that intention, and I teach you how to do this, while you are moving into those high frequency states of arousal and orgasm, it supercharges it into the quantum field.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. So much to talk about there. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Where to begin?
So there's sort of a base level of what one might call sex magic, which is sort of moving, really paying attention to the subtler energies of intimacy and sex, right? Yes. Let's say some of the techniques for that are making sure eye contact is there, being more gentle, right? Something like that. You just stepped into something else, which was an ancient occult practice of building chi in the lower chakras through sex. Yes. Because it is the highest, most potent energy. And then using almost like you're wind farming or something. You're taking this excess energy and pulling it up to your chakras to clear your chakras and to reach higher states of consciousness. Can you speak about how that is done and how you can do that in the bedroom without completely killing the moment? Is this something that has to be like, you go into it like agreed upon, like, hey, we light a candle, like we're going to be like, okay, like we're going to try this exercise and see if we, can touch God?
Yeah, you can. So the best way I've found to teach it is for you to practice it on your own first and through self-stimulation, because you don't have the distractions. And, you guys probably are you're in this all the time. So you could probably practice together if you wanted to. But I often recommend that couples do it alone first. And I even have couples where only one of them. In fact, my husband, I'm so obviously into this stuff, and I have been for a long time. My nickname for my husband of 25 years is Senior Root Chakra, because he is so not in the metaphysical. He is so pragmatic. He just pats me on the go on with your bad self. So he's always been my guinea pig, usually an unwitting and unknowing guinea pig. And that's how I do my little experiments at first. And that's how I create my systems. And then I go and teach couples and I see how it works with them. And then I write about it. And so when I was coming up with these systems, I would practice on him without telling him what I was doing, so I could have an authentic reaction. Also, if I told him, he'd look at me like I was freaking nuts anyway.
That's really smart to do it that way.
And then I would watch his mind get blown, and his physical, very heightened reaction. He would kill me if he knew I was saying this, but I'll just say it that way. And he wasn't even aware of what was happening.
Whoa. See, that's so interesting, because in our practice, it's a lot of testing and experimenting. Yes. We're learning things and we're seeing what works. And so there's been we'll do things individually, and then we also try doing things in complete harmony and synchronicity.
All the more powerful when you can do that. So to practice, like even with the chakra thing, you are literally creating a metaphysical experience. And on the 3D level, this is mind-blowing orgasm. This is full body arousal and orgasm, rather than for most of us, it's localized to the gender. So just on a practical sense, it's so much more intense, exciting, and pleasurable. But you're learning to use so I have half the book is exercises. I'm trying to make this super, like, do this, this, and this. This is the chakra elevator, for instance. So you learn to practice, okay, I'm self-stimulating, maybe with a vibrator, maybe with my hands or something else, and I'm feeling this energy, this tingling warmth, arousal in my root chakra. Using my breath, my Kegels, and my visualization, I'm going to pull it up to my sacral chakra and let it drop back down. And then I'm going to pull it up again and drop back down. Now I'm going to pull it up to my solar plexus and drop back down. Then I'm going to pull it up again and drop back down. Now I'm going to pull it up to my heart. Maybe I'm going to sometimes pull, this is a different exercise, but I'm going to pull energy in through the top of my head, circle it around my heart, and send it into my partner's heart. Or because the masculine usually receives sexual energy through the genitals and shares it through the heart, and the feminine receives through the heart and shares through the genitals, which is how we operate in 3D as well. You can circle it. So this is what I would do to my husband before he knew what I was doing. I would pull energy in through the top of my head. I would circle it around with the arousal already building in my genitals. I would send it into his genitals and pull it out his heart into mine and down to my genitals and send it into his genitals and from my, and you can do that with both of you knowing it and intentionally.
Whoa.
And then if it's just wild, all the things you can play with and
amazing.
create.
So for somebody who doesn't understand when you say bringing in energy, right? So can you explain what that means? Is it a visualization? Is it a sensation? What are you trying to work towards in order to be pulling in that energy?
Yeah. So I work a lot with people who live a lot in I love when I work with people who are living in the woo with me, but most of my clients are Fortune 500 people who live a lot in the 3D world or whoever, and so I like to use a lot of visualizations. And so we'll just practice grounding at first, where I'll have them breathe in and imagine a beautiful light. And it's always interesting to see what color comes to you because it will correspond to the part of you that really needs that energy. Light coming in through the top of your head as you breathe in. And as you breathe in really deeply, it fills every cell, every corner of your body with beautiful sparkling light. And as you breathe out, it shoots out your tailbone deep, deep, deep into the earth, grounding you there. And this is one of the most beautiful ways to embody, to come back into your body, right? So I'll start teaching them first and this is what I do in the book. I teach you first how to come into your body and feel the energy there and feel the grounding. And after 3 or 4 breaths like that, they're like, yeah, my hips feel a little heavier. I feel like I'm more here. Oh, the light was, orange. Okay, so that's corresponding with the sacral chakra, which is the seat of creativity and sexuality. Or maybe it's green, which is meaning the heart has some stuff going on. We may not even go there at first, but they're starting to learn how to, and where intention goes, energy flows, always. This has been shown in quantum physics. This is why quantum physicists leave the room when they do experiments, because their intentions or expectations of the outcome will impact the results of the experiment. On the quantum level, that's all that's happening. And we are quantum beings. If we were to look at ourselves through an atomic microscope, we're all just vibrating energy. So you're learning how to visualize and practice pulling energy in. So back to your question, you're pulling light in. I love to think of it, and I really do believe it's God's light, it's oneness light that I'm pulling in. I never learned until I was probably in my 40s that you aren't supposed to give ever energy from yourself. You were supposed to give it through yourself. I had no idea until I got into recovery as a codependent that was the way it's supposed to work on a practical level, but also on an energetic level. So you're doing this with sex magic as well. You're pulling energy through the top of your head. You're pulling it from the earth. I sometimes even pull it through the spiritual heart in your back. But it's about visualizing it.
Can you explain with that codependency thing with the energy? What do you mean by that?
So we're all human tuning forks, right? And I get so deep into this. If you want to geek out on the science of this and also how it works in your relationships, that's my last book, Quantum Love.
Geek out.
But I wrote that book with send your root chakra in mind. So I wrote it really like the science.
Good old senior root chakra.
He's been my favorite teacher I've ever had, 25 years and counting. So we're all human tuning forks, and we're constantly in training, matching to each other. In our love relationships, really entangled, not even in training. But even for any of us to perceive each other in this room, or for anybody watching or listening to be able to perceive us, we are all vibrating in harmony. But there's a range. And so what usually happens is you'll come into a room with a group of people, and everyone's kind of unconsciously finding the happy medium of the energetic frequency, unless you are holding your own, right? So a codependent never holds their own, metaphorically or literally, right? We tend to be externally oriented. And if you're not okay, you're a little codependent, Cody. If you're not okay.
Tell me something I don't know.
I know you know. If you're not okay, I'm not okay. I have to make you okay before I can relax.
Yeah.
You know, so that's on the practical level. On the energetic level, we are unconsciously tapping into the frequencies around us and finding the happy medium and matching everyone else. What I teach you to do in Quantum Love is get clear on your intention, how you want to feel walking into a room. I'm about to go give a talk in front of 1,000 doctors. How do I want to feel? I want to feel excited. I want to feel validated. I want to feel inspired. I want to look at how would I feel looking down and seeing none of them asleep or on their phones and really focused on what I'm saying and being inspired. And I move myself into that energy and I hold that before I even go into the room and when I'm in the room, and everyone matches me. So as a codependent, I never did that practically and I never did that energetically. One of the most powerful things I did and started to learn to do as part of my recovery is to hold my own, not only in boundaries, but energy. This is what we're doing. And in love relationships, on an atomic level, we're entangled in such a deep way. So they did this really cool study, I think it was at the University of Washington, where they took couples in a loving relationship and they put them in totally different parts of the building or the campus. And they put one person in a brain scanner and another person, they took a light and they shined it into their eye, and the ocular receptors in the brain of the other partner lit up.
Wow.
Our heart rate synchronized, our energy. If we were to take two entangled atoms.
Yeah, quantum entanglement.
Right. When they're entangled, they're spinning in the same frequency, angle, direction. And I took one to the moon and started spinning it in the opposite direction. The one here in the same millisecond would spin in the opposite direction. So we're impacting each other really deeply, constantly.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with sex is it's sort of the personification of that quantum energetic spiritual phenomenon. So you're taking that phenomenon and rooting it so deeply in the physical material world.
Yes.
And it's one of the problems that, I experienced, as a young man, looking as sex as this thing to be experienced.
Yes.
And, not understanding that you're essentially like spiritually performing, like you're spiritually entangling yourself with this person, and you take on whatever they have. And,
yes. Most people don't understand that. I talk about the energetic hangover of sex in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that happens every time.
It does. And you're describing everything so perfectly, and it's so cool that you bring the science along for the ride. Also, your explanation of sex magic was super simple and clean, talking about the Kegel, the breathing, and the visualization.
Yes.
And keeping it that simple, because like that is what we do. The Kegel is sort of like you're feeling that energy in your root chakra, and then you're using breath and visualization, pulling it up. Yes. We started with doing something called, I call it flossing, which essentially would go up, go down, go up, go down. So you can gain control because you have to feel through it.
Yes.
And then that eventually turned into what we call the Codicius, which is sort of this like serpent energy going up and through the chakras.
Kundalini, yes.
And then we've sort of done our own quantum version because we know what a primordial spiral or a toroidal field looks like. And now it's become more of a three-dimensional spiraling energy that goes up. I think one of the things that was most interesting to hear you say is, because all that energy is pulled from the root when we do it, is calling in like God or whatever you want to call it, that is coming in from the highest point you can feel above your head, and you're pulling that in from there. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that was interesting is you were talking about doing this exercise with your partner,
yes,
which I think maybe we've done a couple of times, but not too extensively. So are you insinuating that essentially like you can essentially through visualization, you can start to merge the toroidal fields by vision. Like, how does that work? You're going through their crown and out their root, or is it always?
She was saying through the heart.
Through the heart. Yeah. So if you even think about it on I love to like bring it to the 3D and then vacillate. I spent a lot of time vacillating between the two places.
It can be exhausting.
I talk to people a lot, couples a lot, about what I call the sex romance stalemate, which typically happens if you're in a relationship with a woman or someone in their feminine, because women are in large part, in long-term relationships especially, are in large part inspired to be sexual when they feel emotional and romantic connection to the person they're going to be having sex with. That's a big part of our sexual motivation. And this isn't true for all women, all men, obviously. I don't mean to stereotype, and it doesn't matter about your gender. If you're more in your, it's about being more in your feminine and more in your masculine. The feminine is greatly inspired to be sexual when she feels emotionally close and romantic to the person she's having sex with. In fact, I did national study on what the most sexually satisfied women have in common. And it's not the orgasms that they have. It's the emotional closeness and connection they felt to the person they were having sex with. The masculine achieves a sense of emotional closeness and romanticness through the physical act of sex. That's his vehicle for getting there. So when she is not available sexually, busy, just had a kid, stressed, whatever, it's not that she doesn't love him or want to have sex with him, but she's not as sexually available. He doesn't feel as emotionally close or romantic with her. And then as he's less emotionally close and romantic, she's that much less sexually interested. And then this stalemate kicks in. And it's so beautiful to me that the Tantra techniques mirror this, that the feminine takes in energy from her partner through her heart and then shares it through her genitals. And the masculine takes in energy through the genitals and then shares it through the heart. So you can pull the energy up. Like, what I love to pull it up from above, circle it, like create some momentum, and then shoot it into his genitals and then pull it back in. Or if you're doing it together, you would be participating in that. So you're synchronizing your breath. Maybe you're in the yab yum position, which you would be sitting and you would be straddling him, facing him, staring into each other's eyes. You're inside her, synchronizing breath, rocking back and forth. He's sending energy into your heart. You're breathing it in, pulling it down, sending it in. He's pulling it up to his heart. You see how you created that
this
circle?
Is blowing my mind. Tanya, your dad cannot listen to this episode, okay? But this is so fucking crazy.
If you are listening, Dad.
Stop listening
I'm
now.
sorry. No,
Stop.
It's fine. He has a partner.
What I'm about to say is not acceptable.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, God. Dad, go away.
No, please leave. Shut this off. So I call it a gate when it comes to like sexual energy.
Yes.
And I call it that because my primitive male monkey mind is so sexually charged that like I have to there's no filter. I just have to I close the gate.
Okay.
But with Tanya, like, it's so funny if there's a moment where she feels what I would define romance is feeling secure and taken care of.
Yeah. For her, that's probably maybe true.
Also, no stress.
And safe and no stress.
If I have stress, I'm so in my masculine. I'm like not even here.
Right. And there's like no real, and I appreciate that about you. I've dated a girl who was like so sexual, and it was like to the point where I was like, we'd be in public places and she would just be like all over random guys. I'd be like, hello? Like, what are you doing? Tanya, like, but when I feel that gate open for her, like if I say, hey, you want to make love, or you want to say, and she opens the door to it, I'm so whatever. I'm just saying it. It like literally, I feel it in my genitals immediately as soon as before she says anything to me. I will feel it. I will feel my penis's name is Mr. Business. It's important for you to know this. And Mr. Business, it's like I always say, it's like
we talked about with his parents on the second episode we have.
It's fine, Mr. Business and the busy boys are my testicles, but and my asshole's the accountant. But I swear, as soon as she's like,
Celine, plug your ears.
I say, no, Celine, listen to it. You need to know. how this operation runs. But as soon as she like, you know, hey, you want to have sex? And she's like down, I literally, Mr. Business, he's like, I'm up. Like, he's like, oh, what? I'm like, I feel it before she even says anything. Like,
you're entrained. You're entangled.
You're entangled. God, that's so amazing. And
I want to know something.
Yeah, there's so much.
There's so much. So you were talking about like the chi energy, the ka energy, whatever, the rising of the energy. What are your thoughts on like semen retention?
Yes, I wanted to know that too.
We get into that too. So yeah, you can, I mean, look, and this is how the Sting talks about his 24-hour orgasm. He's talked about that a lot.
Unaware of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's really into Tantra with Trudy. And that's how he did it. So basically what semen retention is clinically retrograde ejaculation. So instead of the semen coming out the urethra in the penis, right before it's going out the urethra, there's like a little trap door, and using your Kegels and breath, you're pulling it, you're keeping it from propelling out, it goes up into the bladder.
Whoa.
Or that's different than edging.
Yeah.
Edging is where you get maybe to a 6 or 7 out of 10, and then you go back down to a 4, and 10 being ejaculation, and you're going back and forth. With retrograde ejaculation or semen retention, you're able to have multiple orgasms, which is what most women do, right? Women are capable. This is why typically women are capable of multiple orgasms and men are not, because men have what's called a refractory period. So they get, if you think about the arousal scale, they get to arousal, then they plateau, then they have orgasm, then they have where it propels out of the penis, ejaculation, then they have a refractory period. And as they get older, that refractory period gets longer and longer. But if he retrograde ejaculates, he can go from plateau to orgasm, plateau to orgasm, plateau to orgasm until he wants to ejaculate. And that's what women typically do, except women who ejaculate. Now, it's estimated, 30% of women ejaculate, although any woman can learn to ejaculate. But basically, they did this fascinating study that shows that actually most women are retrograde ejaculators. So they looked at the urine of women who orgasm after orgasm. Some of them ejaculated and some of them don't ejaculate during orgasm. And when they looked at their urine, the women who ejaculated had female ejaculate, just like male ejaculate, has something in it called PSA, prostatin stimulating antigen, but it's PSA, right? So semen has that, as does female ejaculate. So when they looked at the urine of women post-orgasm, they found that the women who ejaculated had no PSA in their urine. The women who did not ejaculate had PSA in their urine.
Wow.
So it's the same thing is happening for men when they're doing semen retention.
Wow. Okay, so this is a great segue into what I wanted to talk about. So when I was like probably 19 years old or something like that, I overheard a group of women in my family. Well, I was not supposed to be listening to the conversation. I was supposed to be in bed. But I heard them talk about how, one of them said that they had never had an orgasm.
Yeah, really common.
And the other one said she had also not had an orgasm. Mm-hmm. And these are women that were much older than me. So I freaked out because I, at the time, had one partner because I was 19. And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm broken too. Aww. And that's what I thought. I was like, oh, I'm broken. So I went on a mission for an entire year to have an orgasm. And so I went and bought my first vibrator, and it was like painful. Like I remember being like, this is painful. I couldn't like get myself over the like hump, mm-hmm. right? And I was like, the whole time in my head, I'm broken. All the women in my family are broken. I had no idea, right? We didn't talk about sex. It just was not a thing. I was very far behind in that area. Yeah. And so I remember after it finally happened, which was a year of trying, I cried and I was like, oh my God, I'm not broken. And I started talking to other women around me, my female friends and stuff like that, for like over years. And the amount of women that would tell me that they have never had an orgasm was outstanding.
Yes.
Outstanding. They had literally, so when I was like 20 years old, I had a boyfriend who told me if I didn't have an orgasm with him soon, he was going to break up with me. So, of course, that began the fake orgasms.
Yes.
And this is what I hear from endless women, as that they start having, they do these fake orgasms just to get it over with, because to not upset the man.
Mercy fake, I call it.
Yes. Okay. So I want to talk about this on multiple levels. But I also do want to know on another level. So we can talk about this, but I also want to know on another level, when it comes to sex magic, for a woman that like has never had an orgasm before, how they could also use this book.
Yes, absolutely. And I've written so many. I mean, this is why I wrote my first book ever, which was, I don't know, 2001 or something, called For Women Only, because it is epidemic how few women have an orgasm. And it's not because they're broken, although that's what they think. It's a lack of information and understanding about how their body works and how their arousal works. And it's the lack of understanding that it takes the average woman 20 minutes to reach orgasm during a sexual encounter, while it takes the average man 7.5 minutes. So there's a huge orgasm gap. And it breaks my, I mean, I hear that story all the time. I can't tell you how many couples have sat in my office. She's not able to have an orgasm. And he says, well, I don't know what's wrong with her. Every other woman I've ever been with has been. I'm like, but honey, 75% of women
lying.
Fake. And that's exactly why, because first of all, women tend to be people pleasers. We're trained to be that way. So he's working too hard. This is taking too long. I'm self-conscious. So I'm just going to like throw him a bone, or I know it's not going to happen. So I'm just going to throw him a bone, give him a mercy fake so he feels good about it, and we can move on to the cuddling. And then that keeps happening and keeps happening. And eventually she starts to feel resentful. And then she doesn't know how to bring it up, because it's when he does find out, he's like, whoa, like this is so mortifying. A, B, you're a pretty good liar. Like, what else have you been so then we have to like work through all the trust rebuilding before we can even get back to the orgasm. So I always tell women, don't fake. You're, first of all, giving credit where credit isn't due, but also you're doing yourself and all the women who come after you potentially a disservice. But to have an orgasm with someone else requires coordination, communication, patience, comfort with yourself, vulnerability, So if you haven't had an orgasm, I always say to women, you got to figure it out on your own first. That women, it's in the movies, we think like, oh, I just have to be with the right guy who knows what he's doing. That's rarely the case.
Yeah. I read this book called Pussy.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Regina Thomas show, is that her name?
Yeah.
And that book literally changed my life.
Good.
Because it was talking about all the stuff that I had never heard about before, about like growing up as a woman and being like society telling you're supposed to be disgusted with yourself down there and all this stuff. And I was like, especially after working with ayahuasca, like I've had to find all the internalized misogyny inside myself, and I'm still dealing with it. I mean, it's been years since this first came up, and I'm still finding pieces inside of me, and I'm like, oh my God, like that's so messed up that I would think that about myself or other women or whatever it may be.
Most of it, you're absolutely right, is unconscious. And it's funny that you were saying the gate, because the yoni, female genitals, is Sanskrit for sacred gate.
Oh, boom. Wow. That makes sense.
and you're absolutely right. I remember in graduate school, and for many years since, even up to a few years ago, I love doing sex education with elementary school kids. I love going into schools and teaching them about healthy sexuality and safer sex and all of that. But one of the things that I would do is just to get the giggles out and also to start normalizing the vocabulary, I would say, okay, we're going to write on the board every word you can think of for female genitals and for male genitals. And oh my God, do you remember the comedian George Carlin?
Yeah.
Did you ever see that thing he did about all the words for a woman's genitals?
No.
Okay, look it up. I mean, it was like that. It's hilarious, but also appalling, speaking of misogyny. But these were the kinds of things they would come up with. Like for guys, it was like 7 inches of heaven, love snake, all of these words like that for penis. And for women, it was like
Mr. Business.
Right. Mr. Business. For women, it was like tuna chunks and stink box lunch, axe wound.
Yeah.
Like these were the words that they're hearing on the street. And so
this is what you hear growing up.
Yes.
And like, how are you supposed to love yourself with this?
And it's all that internalized misogyny that we are taught. I remember my little goddaughter, I went to visit and her mom wasn't home yet and her babysitter was with her and she was taking a bath. She was maybe like 2 or 3 years old. And her babysitter says, now wash your noo-noo because we don't want it to be stinky. And I just looked at the babysitter and looked at this little girl. I said, first of all, it's a vulva, not a noo-noo. We use the correct, just like this is your elbow, this is your nose, that's your vulva. By the way, it is vulva. Vagina is the internal part. Most people don't even call it the correct word. And it is not stinky. It is beautiful.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the creator of life.
That's right.
Yes. It's the sacred gate.
It's the sacred gate. It's the portal of divinity.
Yes.
You calling it a sacred gate, and, you know, obviously it's ironic for me to take the cue, like talking about misogyny and be like, well, let me tell you my opinion.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're going through working through a lot of this together. There's a lot of stuff to work through. I think one of the reasons I call it a gate, the most profound experience I've ever had was in ayahuasca ceremony around what was called to me the curse of the patriarchy. Mm-hmm. Tanya, have I told this on here so I don't tell it? I don't want to repeat myself.
You can do it fast.
Long story short, there were like 5 girls in the circle and like 25 dudes. And the shaman chose to stuck the girls all in a half circle in the center and all the men around them.
They were all around us. It was terrible.
Very weak, energetic point. And
not good.
I'd say out of the 5 girls, you know, I'd say all of them were friends, including Tanya. Mm-hmm. And you know, one of them was my writing partner,
who we
Keaton,
told you about.
It was her first circle. So so the medicine came on and it had some shit to say about it. Have you ever worked with that medicine, ayahuasca or anything like that?
Not as much as you guys have, but I'm familiar with it.
We don't that much. No, I think it's been in 10 years I've worked with it about 20 times.
Yeah.
So 20
ceremonies.
20 ceremonies. Yeah, with that medicine. So it had some shit to say. It started off the ceremony by showing me pretty much an experience where Tanya had led a meditation circle in the park and I was not there, and it showed me an empty space. And actually, you know, she didn't have that support from me. I was seeing a friend from out of town. I didn't go, and it was the last time she did that. And really wanted me to see what I did to her not being a supportive system for her. So then it dragged me to like pretty much like the beginning of creation. And it showed me something that it's like a dream I can hardly remember. But what it showed me was pretty much when the one became the two. Mm-hmm. And this initial divide, this initial split of masculinity and femininity, this Visca Pisces, if you will. And it showed me that the male polarity left the female polarity for independence. And that there was this core wound in the woman around security because it was the male energy left. And it showed me that this feminine polarity, this initial deity, whatever, it was the main deity, that it was wounded from being abandoned.
Yes, that's a big wound.
And how it is the superior metaphysical, emotional, spiritual counterpoint, and the masculine has a superior physicality inherent to it. Don't mean to be generalized, but whatever this is, the vision. And it showed me how when the male came back to the woman, that the woman had a boundary up because it was hurt.
Yeah. And
that this male polarity abused its physical power to insert itself back into the woman. And that this was the curse of the patriarch, that this was the initial, the core wound in all of humanity. This is expressed through this feminine masculine divide.
Makes sense.
And that it needed to heal this wound to be willfully and consensually accepted back, re-merged back with the feminine charge. And this was brutal. It was one of the most hard nights of my life. I feel very emotionally talking about it. But I don't know. It's so this to us, we believe to be a core aspect of the meaning of life. Yeah. This is essential. It's not a side thing. Figuring out how the one becomes two in the physical, you know, as it is on earth, it is in heaven. You know, it's we do. This is something we're most fascinated about. And there was, one of the funny things about that ceremony is it was starting to show me that everything in life is dicks and pussies. It was like ones and zeros. I see everything
that way.
It was literally like, how much more on the nose does it have to be?
Binary codes, just ones and zeros.
Yeah, they're like, you're a world ruled by men, and you guys shoot giant metal exploding dicks at each other when you fight. You stab giant metal, dicks into each other. The swords, like when you want to kill each other. Sorry, am I being? But the point is everything you're talking about. You can see
it everywhere.
It's everywhere. So hearing you talk about this internalized misogyny and that like the female genitalia has been discredited and disrespected. I think that's for control.
All of it is about control, and it happened so many thousands of years ago, and it's just been perpetuated until the rise of the divine feminine, which came with Age of Aquarius, which is what we're in right now. And then I spend a lot of time in the book really diving into this kind of yin yang, right? That's what you're talking about, the masculine and feminine and the balance. And there is that inherent wound, right, on the metaphysical, energetic level between the masculine and feminine, and on the practical level, because I've yet to meet a woman who hasn't been abandoned, mistreated.
No.
So she has those wounds on the practical 3D level and on the generational trauma level and on the metaphysical level, on all three levels, right? And the feminine is the creativity. Like I always try to explain it to couples, like the feminine is the river, the bubbling, moving, creative, expressive river, and the masculine is the riverbank, that is containing and holding space.
Yeah.
And just like you didn't do at that meditation, right? And it's about how do you, and we're raised, I talk about these snags in our generation, these sensitive new age guys, right? That how do you hold that sensitivity and that adulation and honor for the feminine while still holding your own boundaries and power, and not because, if you were raised by, I call them, men who've been nursed through burning bras, right? If you've been raised by a feminist, a lot of feminism is misguided into male hatred, which I think is equally damaging.
It is 100%.
And as a mother of 3 boys, I watched it firsthand and was like, I remember he was 14 at the time saying, oh shit, it's Women's History Month at school again. I'm like, why are you complaining about women? Because I'm going to be bashed the entire month. They're going to be telling me how horrible I am because I'm a man and how selfish I am and how men suck. And it's just going to be really a bummer to be at school this month.
It's so crazy that that's the way that this goes. Is like if one person is oppressed, you have to go the opposite. That makes zero sense.
We can lift the feminine up without diminishing and shaming the masculine, which is why so many young men are becoming obsessed with Andrew Tate, is because, so their mothers were like, whatever you do, don't do to a woman what was done to mom, but not showing them a model of healthy masculinity and how to be the riverbank, celebrating and cultivating and supporting and being in awe of the feminine while still having your own needs and wants and your own boundaries and your own power. And it's not, hasn't been we talk a lot about how there isn't a model for healthy femininity. There's also hasn't been a model other than Jesus for healthy masculinity. I mean, the real Jesus, not the church Jesus. So we need that too. Right.
Yeah, that's something I've been trying to get into because I'm sort of that archetype of raised by a feminist, moved to in their feminine, and had to navigate that. What is masculinity?
Yes.
I've been working on that, and it's been and maybe you can help me with this, but I've been coming to, I did your birthday ceremony around this, and it was sacrifice, responsibility, and strength is what I got.
Beautiful.
And then essentially, it was interesting because that first vision I talked about where they were showing this curse of the patriarch thing, it was kind of humbling. It pretty much was like, you're just supposed to hold space for Tanya. Like she is this child, this woman, she's this sacred container and you're the
riverbank.
It would be the riverbank. Yeah. They didn't use that language, but that's what they were saying.
Yeah.
And it was humbling.
Such a great visualization. I've not heard that before.
Yeah. And they also said you had to sacrifice. They said that women naturally sacrifice themselves to create life. And they said it's inherently baked into their model. They said you have to look for where you can sacrifice, and that is like a sacred male thing. I don't know if that's true. I don't know.
I feel like it's where can you be of service, right? I think, and sometimes being of service is a sacrifice because you'd rather be playing your video games than going and filling her car with gas or something, and it's also understanding how it's not, there's no one size fits all formula. It's how does Tanya feel supported, held, and protected, and most of all, I think when the feminine, because the feminine has river rapids at times, we have storms. We are fluctuating hormonally and energetically. We're very intuitive and we don't always make sense in a practical sense. And so like even my husband, Senior Root Chakra, has learned that if I say no, like I know you really want to work with this man or this woman who seems like, a great partner for what you're doing, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I can't tell you what it is because there's nothing wrong with them, but no. And I don't use that often, but he listens when I say, he's learned to listen, or we've got to move from here. Something is coming. I don't know what. Well, where are we moving? I don't know. I'll know it when we find it, Right. And he has learned to follow that, even if it doesn't make sense. And that is containment, as is when she has her storm, is in a mood, is throwing a fit, isn't making sense. And he is feeling like, I don't know. This is what a lot of men do. I don't know what to do to help her. If I can't, I don't know how I can be of service. So I'm either going to shut down or I'm going to make her wrong for being that way, or I'm going to just run away. That is not containment. So it's that feeling of like, I may be pissed at you right now. I may not understand you right now. I may not know how to make sense of this right now, but I'm not going anywhere. I am like rooted and holding you and holding space for you and ready to move with you, even if I'm not sure what to do next.
Yeah, that's interesting. You use that term because we talk about holding space a lot. And it's weird when I'm in my most, I don't know, I would call it like sacred male, whatever. The state of consciousness it is sort of this neutral space where I am tethered to that higher source and there's no reaction because the reaction will just compound what's passing through, the emotion that's coming through her, as opposed to being so reactionary to everything. And I can be very reactionary.
Yeah, we all can. That does not help.
Right. So I have
nor does trying to fix it.
Yeah. So we talked about, the power of the pussy and how it's been disrespected by the people and being reclaimed. I want to talk about the inverse of that within the population about men with penile, inferiority, like small penis complex. We've never told the story on the show, and I'll tell the short version. But pretty much I heard as a child that I watched some sitcom or something and someone made some joke, like if you have a small penis, he looks like a small penis, something like some sitcom. And I, in my like child 5-year-old brain, thought a woman will never love me if I don't have a big penis. So that began a crazy psychotic belief system and pattern where as a small child, I started to pray every night for a big penis.
Also, every birthday when he's blown out the candles as a kid, it's for a big penis.
When they play the home videos, I always say, I was wishing for a big dick right there.
So cute.
Yeah, it was
but
cute.
But what's underneath that is that you wanted to be desirable and loved. That's what was underneath your big penis.
I wanted fetish. That was up for my big. It did start a turf war. This is a true story. Essentially, I went to have my first sexual encounter in like 8th grade, and I fingered her, which I immediately jizzed my pants and thought to myself, fingering's amazing. Yeah, because I had no idea what just happened.
Was that your first time ejaculating?
Yeah, but I didn't know. But and then she went to unbutton my pants. We're like fucking 12 or 13 years old. I don't want to say her name, but bless your heart if you're listening to this. And then I went, I got afraid. What if my penis is too small for her?
What
and
if
she
I'm
doesn't
inadequate?
Love me? Right. So I shut that shit down and I said, oh, wait, hold on. I hear I hear Megan's mom coming. So, of course, she went to school. We were at rival schools, and she went and confided in her guy friends. Does he not like me? Aww. He stopped me from doing this. And, of course, they turned around and said, well, Cody's gay.
Yeah.
And then all the dudes started calling my house.
Such assholes.
They started being like, calling me names, homophobic slurs. So, of course, naturally, it led to, like, fights, like massive brawls, like between this school, and it culminated in our like football game where the police had to escort me and the other players
all
off.
Because of your small penis.
All because I was afraid of a small penis. Yes. People got hospitalized in a fight.
You see how far those insecurities can go.
It's also hilarious because Cody does not have a small penis, so it's actually really funny. Just for the record.
His penis is fantastic.
Mr. Business, he's good. He checks out. He's fine. He's good business. Business is good. So what would you say about like what is that like inferiority complex in the culture for men? Like, is it just like the value is masculinity assigned somehow? Like, yeah,
I mean, it's a sign of it's like become a. First of all, it is not the size of the ship; it's the motion of the ocean. In fact, the research has shown, this is so interesting to me and makes so much sense, that the larger a man's penis is, the worse lover he is. Because he doesn't feel like he has to work that hard because I got a big dick. But it really doesn't make that. It's about how you use it. And in fact, most women will tell you if they've been with someone with an exceptionally abnormally huge penis that they don't even like, it hurts. They don't want that there. I've counseled men, and you wouldn't think, little you couldn't imagine this, but who are self-conscious about how huge their penis is, because when they whip it out, the women are like, that is not coming near me.
Oh, so everyone's having a hard time.
Yeah,
doomed if you do, doomed if you don't.
Yes, everyone's having a hard time. And the penis, they're taught in all of these subtle, on TV and the community, that the source of their power and their masculinity and their attractiveness is their penis. Which is the least, I mean, obviously, if it's microphallic, like the size of a fingernail, or if it's...
That's a condition.
Then maybe she'll be a little disappointed. But the truth is, it's really about how he uses it, and there's only sensation in the first third of the vagina. There's no sensation, so obviously you can have some cervical, a lot of women like cervical stimulation, but you can have a smaller penis and be one of the best lovers in the world.
But there's also like, 5,000 nerve endings in the female clitoris or something, which goes across.
Get to work, son.
No, it literally goes across the entire thing. It's kind of strange because it looks like a penis and it looks like balls.
It comes from the same tissue. It looks like a little wishbone.
Yeah.
And they didn't discover that until 2000.
What?
The year 2000.
What?
If you can believe it. Because I remember I was doing all the research, and I was one of the people like leading the charge when Viagra, this is how we came to it. When Viagra came out for men, so this was in 1998, all of these women started flooding my office and are like, hey, I've been with my husband for 40 years. The past 10 years, he hasn't tried to touch me. I've been fine with that. Now he's got this Viagra stuff and he suddenly wants to get busy. Like, can you give me Viagra? And so I started looking like, can we give her Viagra? Would it work? And so I went into the literature. What is the anatomy and physiology of a female sexual response in her body? Where would she vasodilate? Nothing. Zero. They hadn't even mapped the crucial nerves and blood vessels that are central to sexual function in women back in 1998. They would go in with a robot to do a prostate surgery on a man to spare all the crucial nerves and blood vessels, but go in and do a hysterectomy on a woman without even thinking about it. And by the way, they still haven't properly mapped it. But there was a woman named Rosemary Bassan who was an anatomist. Anatomy. She dissected it and discovered up until that point, they thought the clitoris was just this cute little nub. But it actually goes back and it branches out and goes almost to it's 12 inches and it goes almost to the pubic bone.
Yeah.
And so that's what's in the labia, behind the labia. But if you think about it developmentally, when an embryo is developing, it's called the Eve plant. Every embryo develops as a girl, unless it's XY and the right amount of testosterone comes in. And then what are the labia? turn into scrotum. And what is the clitoris turns into the frenulum, the head of the penis. And so it all comes from the same embryonic tissue.
Yeah. Whoa. It's so wild. And also the thing that's so crazy to me. So when I hear people talking about, like, you know, gay people, it's like not supposed to be or whatever it is, right? Like religious people. I'm like, first of all, women have their stimulation, the majority is on the outside.
Yes.
And also for men, they have prostates.
Yes.
So I'm like, that shows you right there that is completely inaccurate.
Yeah. And only 30% of women reach orgasm through intercourse. And it's, speaking of the small penis thing again, and that's usually because she's getting simultaneous clitoral stimulation at the same time.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, I want to turn that into a movie called "Please God, Give Me a Big Penis." Just a good old coming of age story. I want to take us back to Tantra for a second.
Yeah.
And there's so many stories we could tell about our personal experiences, but we talk all the time.
That's
and
right.
This is precious time. This is precious time we have with you. So we talk a lot about Tantra. And the pleasure and the orgasms, but have you had personal experiences of apotheosis, of reaching divine states of consciousness beyond pleasure? We really like to unpack phenomenology on the show. Can you tell us any stories and what those encounters were, what they were like, if there's wisdoms that came with them, if there's healing that came with them?
Well, okay. So one thing that's just popping into my mind, which is I call this actually isn't a tantric technique, but it's really beautiful. I call it the pink sparkly vagina technique.
Nice.
And it's something that I would teach women to do, where she would turn her vagina into a pink sparkly vortex of energy. And I was first teaching women how to do this to enhance pleasure. But then, speaking of mercy faking, I would find that women were telling me that they were using it. Like, let's say she had reached an orgasm, or knew she wasn't going to have an orgasm. She wasn't going to fake an orgasm, but she was ready for the sexual act to end, or he was just taking a really long time. Maybe he had delayed ejaculation and it was starting to hurt, get uncomfortable, but she wanted him to finish. She would turn on her pink sparkly vagina and boom, he would just go. Like he was, without her saying a word, affected by it. And I would hear this story again and again. And then I was doing some sort of women's group, and I was teaching them somehow the pink sparkly vagina. It tends to come up a lot. This pink sparkly vagina came up, and 3 months later, I get this email from this woman I didn't know, one of the attendees, that she had been struggling with infertility for 2 years. And they had gone through all the different means, and she was just about, to give up. I think they had one more round or something. And she ended up trying the pink sparkly vagina, and she got pregnant naturally.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell my friend who's going through infertility problems right now. They did IVF. I
describe it in the book, the pink sparkly vagina technique. But with Tantra, yes, I've had so many reports of people having revelations when they almost like you would on a plant medicine, not aggressive like ayahuasca, but maybe, some psilocybin or something. But they have these metaphysical experiences. They feel and experience the vortex between the two of them. They experience themselves in a helix. They get messages from the divine. They get creative. I mean, that has happened to me a million times. My husband's just used to it a million times during sex, where, I won't stop right in the middle, but as soon as it ends, I'm like, I got to write some shit down.
Yeah.
I got an idea for my next book.
You know you're doing it right when you keep a notepad next to your sexual table. Your sexual table. Well, what else do you call it? It's like the lube, the vibrator, the whatever. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that happened that was, so me and Tanya do these, do essentially their ceremonies, but they're like sensual ceremonies, how we would take like dates. We don't do them every so often, but actually this space is based around our sex forts.
We would make sex forts. We'd make actually like blanket forts and pull all lights.
I love that.
What this all came from. It just became a professional looking one.
We just went pro. But
now, did you make a sex room, or would you just like make blankets around the couch?
Well, blankets are like a whole blanket fort thing with the lights and all that stuff. Yeah, lasers.
I want you to do that when you eventually get pregnant. I want you to do it in a sex fort.
That's what. Okay. That's
with a pink sparkly vagina.
I need to read this book. I cannot wait.
Crazy magic when we try to conceive. Like we want to bring in like some star child from the highest dimension.
It's called a magic. What you manifest through sex magic is called a magical child, spelled with a K, not a C, and child, CHILDE, because it could be an actual child or just a thing that you are creating together.
Interesting.
Whoa, that's beautiful. Yeah, this Acid for Squares was birthed out of sex magic, straight up. So that makes sense. The phenomenon I want to talk about is because I think it's important, especially for men when it comes around spiritual, I call it sexual hygiene, which is because most of us culturally have no understanding of that you're essentially spiritually merging with a woman when you have sex with them and, wonder why your life is a fucking mess and like you feel anxious and depressed. Well, maybe you're doing, maybe it's not just the drinking. Maybe it's not just this or that. So one of the things that happened with me and Tanya is we did one of our sex ceremonies and the medicine that we used that night was we used sassafras, MDA, to increase the intimacy. So one of the God's great jokes is that men can't really keep a boner or ejaculate on sassafras or MDMA. So so we make love for hours. We do Tantra. We have beautiful experiences. It's an amazing night, but I don't ejaculate. Okay. So the next morning when we wake up, I go into the bathroom and I'm like, God, I just need to come, right? So I masturbate and I masturbate to porn. This was many years ago. And because I needed the extra stimulation because I'm so
depleted from the
ceremony, from doing psychedelics. So I come out of the shower and I see Tanya and she's on the couch, like holding her groin in pain, going, oh my God, like shooting pain in her genitals. And I just walk up to her, go, Tanya, I have to tell you what just happened. I go, I just masturbated. I masturbated to porn. I go, I am so sorry. I will stop. And I stopped porn.
Yeah, we are so like energetically tied to each other.
Yeah, you're really entangled.
So can you speak about pornography usage? And because now I either don't masturbate or I have a folder that's called My Love and it's Tanya. I really hope your family's not listening to this.
Oh my God, I can't,
whatever.
They'd much rather you masturbate to pictures of her than others.
Well, I'm trying to spiritually make sure the energy is directed towards her and not it's being whatever. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, it's really fascinating.
In the name of science?
Yes. Because, so we could talk about, I think it's fascinating and so telling and beautiful in a way. I know it didn't feel beautiful at the time. What it speaks to your entanglement, right? For good and for bad. But, I would say pre-pandemic, I probably would have always said, look, not when we're talking spiritual and energetics, but if we're just talking practical relationships, there can be a role, a healthy use of porn within reason. However, something really shifted, and it's fascinating to me because I love like anthropology and social themes and stuff. So Pornhub during the pandemic went free. And that changed everything. Free access, 100 times more content than ever before. Now we're starting to see the effects. So scientists are starting to look at what happens. So what happens when you watch porn is that it stimulates the dopamine centers of the brain, which are the addiction centers of the brain. And when you are looking at whoever is having sex on the screen, typically if you're a guy and you're heterosexual, there's a woman involved, you are actually in your brain perceiving, it's going into your brain and being processed and working with all the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves and causing the arousal process. You are perceiving that as a two-dimensional object, not as a human being, not as a three-dimensional person. So you're getting aroused and having orgasms stimulating to a two-dimensional object. And what we see with a lot of use of porn, because two things. One, with dopamine, your brain wants more dopamine. You need more and more and more. That's the same part of the brain that lights up when you do coke, for instance. You need more and more and more. So then it goes from watching some seduction scene or some strangers meeting each other and having sex to now I got to watch a rape. Now I got to watch choking, and it escalates, more and more crazy content to get the same result and the same sexual response. And then what they're seeing is that for men who aren't having an active sexual life with a real human and are mostly or exclusively using porn, they are accidentally training their brains and bodies to respond to a two-dimensional object. So when they go and have sex with a human being, they can't have an orgasm. They can't get it up because they've trained their brain in a different way, or they have to reenact some of those escalated, choking, abusive situations that they're seeing in order to get up, or they have to have porn on while they're having sex. So it's causing a lot of issues, and it's really gotten dangerous erotically and energetically. And from an energetic state, if you even think about, and I know there's tons, I know a lot of women who have OnlyFans accounts and who make Pornhub videos, and, they would be seen, knowing them, they feel very empowered and, aren't sex slaves or anything else. But I would say the majority of women who are in these movies are not in their divine feminine power. They are not coming from a place of power. They've experienced a tremendous amount of trauma. And so when you are ingesting that, you are energetically on that level, in that energy.
I've met a couple of porn stars before, and I've had them tell me horrific stuff that they were, every single one that I had talked to, because I had a friend that did it, so he would bring girls around. They were all molested. Yes. All of them. They had been raped. Yep. They had, the craziest stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is like exactly what you were saying. This is what you're ingesting when you watch porn, is that the majority of people there are doing it because they're traumatized and they're like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or whatever. Or
this is where I can misguidingly find my power. It's a misguided attempt to find their power. Like, I'm going to take control of this.
Yes.
But there's a lot of trauma and even unacknowledged trauma underneath. I've been on porn sets before. I was telling you before, I've seen just about everything as part of my training. And I've been on porn sets before, and just the energy in the room, like the way they talk to the stars, the way, just the words they use, just the whole energy of it is so gross, and it's not at all divine or empowering, or
it's very dehumanizing.
Yes, it's very dehumanizing.
I think, and it's also, for at least from my perspective, it's like it's keeping the male consciousness, holding women in this prison of being an object of our sexual pleasure, as opposed, it's stripping you of your divinity and sacredness. It's definitely tough, and it's interesting to be a part of so many movements and watch how they age and watch how the long-term science, it could be cannabis, it could be porn, it could be, there's a lot of this. Can people practice Tantra by themselves, masturbating, and is it the same exact thing, the technique-wise?
Yes. In fact, yes, I wrote Sex Magick for people who are single or in relationships. So you can not only experience it all through self-stimulation, but you can call in your partner with Sex Magick.
Right. And I love that you're bringing in visualization. If you're moving away from porn and you're moving into imagination, which is visualization, and the imaginatory space is more connected to the spiritual space.
Yes.
It is creation.
Yes.
Imagination is creation, which is of the creator. So that's a gateway to tapping more into what you're teaching. Okay. You fucking rule.
So do you guys.
If you're still with us, like, subscribe, rate, comment, hit that notification button. Can you tell us how they can find you?
I have a great thing happen. So when you buy Sex Magick, you get to come to my live initiation event, which is going to be July 8th. You get my it's not free, but you get it for free, my quantum sex course, which is 8 modules. I think it's like $137. You get that for free. You get you get my Sex Magick ritual journal that I made specifically as an added gift. It's really beautiful. And I think you also get entered into a raffle for a one-on-one session with me if you want it. So that's all at drlauraberman.com/sexmagic.
I would like to say,
are you on social media?
Yes, all at Dr. Laura Berman.
Okay.
Yep.
I wanted to, you are a blessing to our species.
Aw, thank you.
The fact that you come from, you're a doctor and traditional sex therapy to bringing, studying, and practicing these ancient practices and having the consideration to bring science and quantum mechanics into all of this so you can make it universal. We're sure that must have taken a ton of extra work and a lot of self-consciousness and self-awareness. Thank you. This is huge. This is like change the world. Like change the world. Because you don't need a psychedelic. Sex is the strongest psychedelic in the world. And you can build a ceremonial practice with your partner or a partner and it's safe.
Yeah, it is. And beautiful and powerful.
Everyone, please go check out Laura's new book. It just came out, Sex Magic. And follow her on social media and on her website. And obviously go get the book because look at all the stuff that comes with it, which is so cool.
Yeah, check her out. And we have a free Patreon account that's now open. So, you know, if you have Patreon, just go follow us on there. It's free and we're going to start putting stuff up there soon. And yeah, that's all, folks. We love you all. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.